Major Spoilers podcast covers news, reviews, and of course spoilers, and goes into details about the topics discussed. So if you haven't read, listened, or watched the items we talk about, you might want to come back later.
I'm Matthew.
I'm Rodrigo.
And I'm Steven, and you're listening to the Major Spoilers podcast, the podcast for pop culture and comic fans.
In this issue, DeMatteis and Giffen together again. Dr. Fate gets complicated, flowers get violent, Miss Harkness gets even, and something strange is going on at the horizon. And I'm here to tell you that Steven Schleicher is the kindest, bravest, warmest, most human being I've ever known in my life. We know you think we're like the others before who just saw your name and number on the wall, but the Major Spoilers podcast, we've got your number. And for the price of a dime, we will always be there for you. And we're on the air.
Welcome to issue 1094 of the Major Spoilers podcast. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. We'll be talking about Dr. Fate a little bit, the last adventure of Kent Nelson, a little bit later in the show. Thanks for everybody for allowing us to miss out last week. My son had a home soccer game, and there's a soccer game going on right now that I did not go to because it's an away game. And would you know it, the kid has already scored before the game's even over, before halftime, already scored twice. So there you go. I've sacrificed my fatherly time and cheering on my son for you, dear listeners. Get over there and help pay for his forthcoming psych meetings, his therapy sessions, because his dad never showed up to his games. Patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Two goals. That kid's good this year. Really good this year.
Nice. Maybe it's good luck for you to not go.
No, because I went to the game on, I think I talked about this at least last week. So everybody who heard this last week gets to hear it again. In the first 4 or 5 games of the season, he scored 3 of the 5 goals that they made in those 4 or 5 games. And in the tournament that they did last week, he was named to the all-tournament team. So yeah, he's really good this year. And I'm glad he's my kid, even though he doesn't want to do soccer professionally after this. Let's get into some more nerdy stuff that is not soccer. It's the Thunderbolts asterisk. The new trailer has dropped.
Yeah.
What'd you guys think? They haven't really clarified that part yet.
I mean, it looks okay. I like the angle of sticking with Florence Pugh's character and where she's at. Yeah, I think, I think of what could have been. I don't know if it would have been better, but it's mostly shooty guys, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a spy thing. There's basically 2 people with actual superpowers.
Well,
and
Sentry
superpowers
is
of one of them.
Sentry is one of the characters. So
yeah, I guess Sentry is one of the characters, but we don't know what
powers.
Yeah, and technically Taskmaster has powers, but
I think Red Guardian is super strong.
Yeah, he does have some super soldier stuff going on. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's pretty. After all we've seen in the Marvel universe, it's a little weird to dial it back down to that level. Especially in a movie, because that kind of has become what the TV shows are for. So I'm interested in it. Again, I like Florence Pugh's character. I like David Harbour's character. I like Ghost as a character, but she didn't get a lot of time in Ant-Man because she was a mysterious villain.
Right.
So
did you watch the Falcon and Winter Soldier and see Jack Russell, or what is his first name? Kurt Russell's baby boy.
Yeah. U.S. agent.
Yes.
I did see that. I kind of hated that character, but that's the problem, is that I never stopped hating that character, even though the show kind of turned around and tried to redeem him at the end. And I'm like, no, still hate this guy. So I went from being on board with hating this guy to being off board and still hating that guy. So we'll see. We'll see what they do here. Yeah.
What'd you think, Matthew?
I honestly am most interested in seeing the Contessa as played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, because every time I see Julia Louis-Dreyfus, I always feel like she's kind of having to shake off Elaine Bennis. And in Winter Soldier, she got very little screen time, but she was riveting when she was on screen. And I'll watch anything with Florence Pugh. That woman is just absolutely amazing. So I do appreciate the fact that we're dealing with characters who have appeared in various parts of the media. This is, the closest I think we're ever going to get to like the origins of a book like New Warriors or New Teen Titans, where we have a bunch of characters. Let's stick them all together and see if, a team book sells better than an individual book. But I'm also very worried because, I'm looking at this. If this is the next big thing, question mark TN, Marvel Comics. I know, but if it were the next big thing, half of this cast is probably already out in their 70s. And I'm just like, I don't know, is David Harbour going to come back and do another film with a funny accent? I don't know. I feel like it's something I want to see because it feels like it could, and I say could very strongly, be the next step into, they keep talking about phase 4 and phase 5 and phase 6. Everything since Endgame has felt like phase 2.7, where we're just like kind of, it's all
floating.
postscript. Yeah, it's all postscript and it's floating around. And this could be something that ties it all together and gives us something that feels like maybe a central element,
Yeah.
but then it could also not.
So
I
watched
somebody online said that they're like this is going to be the new Avengers. And it's like in 2010 or whenever the first one came out, it's like that was the Avengers. They were big and they were shiny, and like these are the Avengers for 2025. Like sad, like sad
see, that's
former
kinda
guys who like kind of suck at their job.
that's kind of the thing that I kind of have a problem with this. First of all, they're like, oh, the second big trailer for this. And it's like, okay, you've just used 90% of the stuff from the first trailer from like 2 months ago or whenever it was. So, or whatever that they showed at San Diego Comic-Con. So I'm not really impressed to see a lot of the same stuff twice, especially the gag of, hold on, I'm getting dressed, I'm cleaning up for you. And meanwhile, he's, trying to get dressed and everything. So I'm not really super excited about seeing the same stuff twice. And the other thing that this trailer screams to me, at least, is crappity crap. We lost James Gunn, and now we need to do a movie that is Suicide Squad, but without James Gunn, so we can prove to all of the Marvel fanboys that we can do a James Gunn movie, even though James Gunn is not here. And everything that I saw in that trailer, everything I saw in the trailer was just like, we want to be the Suicide Squad, and we want to be like James Gunn, and we've got a lot of broken heroes that need to come together and do something. Thunderbolts, asterisk.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, when you think about all of the villains that there have been and villains that have even returned, it really feels like these just happen to be the available characters for now, right? More than like this feels like a cohesive idea for a team. It's like, well, who's still alive? Oh, what about Yellow Jacket? Like, no, Yellow Jacket got turned into MODOK and then killed. It's like, it's like who? Well, yeah, for Quantumania, which I guess nobody went to see it.
Yeah, I mean, for as far as anybody knows, he's still alive.
Yeah. So, it seems like if this movie had been done, a few years ago, we would get villains that maybe had like fancier powers or something like that. I just like my concern with it is that this is when we're doing the Thunderbolts movie, and it's like college is about to end, and this is who I'm dating, so I guess I'm marrying her.
Yeah.
Kind of feeling.
Yeah.
If they are honestly doing the Sentry, if they're doing the Sentry as anything close to the way we know the Sentry in the comics, this is going to have to be either and oh my God, we're all, this is crazy. There's no way we're going to live through this, which would, support Stephen's Suicide Squad theorem.
Mm-hmm.
But it would also be something where if, because the Sentry, I don't know if you haven't read the comics, the Sentry is a riff on Superman. So if we have all of these characters who basically 5 of them have the power of shooting things, and one has the power of throwing things, and then one has the power of throwing and shooting things as long as she's seen you throw and or shoot. I feel like this group of people, if they are meant to actually be battling the Sentry, are not going to do very well. And I'm wondering if the use of the Sentry isn't going to end up being some sort of weird thematic device to go, see, Marvel versus DC, and this is why we do it better. I'm absolutely overthinking that. Don't get me wrong. But I just feel like every time I watch some of these movies, you see these little moments of, what do you think we're going to wear? Yellow spandex? I just kind of feel like there may be a metatextual element there if they use the Sentry the way the Sentry's been used in the comics.
I mean, his name is Bob Reynolds. So
Bob Reynolds is the Sentry.
Yeah.
He also invented rap.
Yes, I'm sure he did.
He did.
I'm sure NWO would have or NWA would have some.
NWO would be like, bam, bam, they'd be like crotch chopping stuff.
Right. Yeah. Kevin Nash would be like,
okay. So with that Thunderbolts talk out of the way, let us get into some reviews. And let's start with more Marvel talk. Rodrigo, you and I have both watched Agatha All Along. What do you think?
What do I think? I think that Secret Invasion did irreparable damage to me. Like, I can't, after having seen that, I'm sitting here watching Agatha All Along and just like thinking, like, I feel like I should be feeling something. Like, I feel like a lot of this is like good, but I just kind of don't want to. It does do a very good job of like jarring me out of that because it starts in a very WandaVision way. And then I like, oh, back when I enjoyed Marvel TV shows, the one time with the very first one.
So let me postulate something. Let me postulate something here. This is something that Brian Brushwood had kind of suggested because he was also kind of like, I don't know about this Agatha All Along. I really like WandaVision and I like the character of Agatha and everything that they put up, and I want to have those happy feelings again, except when did WandaVision come out?
1,000 years ago.
It didn't come out in 2019.
No. 2021.
What was going on in 2021? COVID, and everybody was locked in. And the only thing you could do was watch WandaVision. So while WandaVision may have been the highlight of, being in lockdown, there may be a subtle implant in your brain that when you watch Agatha All Along and you're thinking, oh, how great WandaVision is, there may be a subliminal trigger that's like, yeah, that's when everything was crap and the world was falling apart.
Interesting. I don't think that's what's happening to me because I'm one of those people that are like looking around and they're like, we still have COVID.
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Guys, that didn't go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, so at the end of WandaVision, there is a very clear like push from the universe of the show to be like, hey, what Wanda did was not 100% terrible and evil, right? And then we turn around and have her in Multiverse of Madness, where she has like gone full turbo, right? And she is the villain of that piece. So it's weird, sort of, I don't know. It feels weird to have the show kind of tell you no, then yes, then no. And then Agatha All Along starts out with Scarlet Witch being dead. Spoilers for the first 10 seconds of the show. And I watched that and I'm like, I feel like this show would have been much more effective if it had come out 2 years after WandaVision.
Yeah, go look at the production history of this. This thing has been delayed for so long. You're right.
Yeah,
it should have, I believe, was scheduled to come out like a year or two ago.
Yeah, so it has a lot working against it. And I will say that the biggest thing that it has working against it is Secret Invasion. Like, I had been watching every Marvel show, and after Secret Invasion, I'm like, I don't think I'm going to watch any more Marvel shows. And then this came out, and I was like, I'll watch this one because I liked WandaVision, and I want to see what they do because it has a great cast, right? It's not just Catherine Hahn, but Aubrey Plaza's in it, Sashir Zamata's in it, Patty Lupone, who is Yellow Diamond, and Deborah Jo Rupp, who is That 70s Show.
She's just along for the ride.
Yeah, so I like really a powerful cast at a heavily female-centric cast. I don't know much. I actually know very little about Magic Marvel, so I know that I'm not going to get pissed off if one character doesn't do something that the character does in the comic, because I actually don't know any of these characters.
That is their winner right there. Let me tell you something. I don't know these characters.
Yeah.
The ones who have comic book antecedents, with the exception of Jennifer Kale, who I think most people would say super, super, super obscure. For me, I'd be like, maybe obscure. But a couple of the character that Patty Lupone is playing has an analog.
Right.
And I know this because I looked her up, but I have never heard of her.
Well, I know I've seen that name before, but yeah, it's like probably saw it once in like that Doctor Strange anthology that we read, and then like, so you're right. I think they do have that going for them. I'm gonna keep watching this for now, because there was a song at the end of the last one.
Yeah,
and
to go down
and everybody they got can sing. I mean, we know Patty Lupone can sing. We know that Sashir Zamata can sing. We know that Catherine Hahn can sing. So most of the voices were probably the real voices. Yeah, it's really much more because they have a really good cast than because because they're doing anything to like earn that goodwill. I will say I'm a little disappointed because when I saw the previews and saw that Aubrey Plaza is in it, I was like, I can't believe they got the Shadow King for this. But I don't think that's who she's playing.
Yeah, Deborah Jo Rupp actually is a professional singer as well.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, the show was first announced in 2021, and then of course we had writer's strike. And that delayed everything. So yeah, by the time this thing gets out, and of course it went through like 3 different name changes: Agatha House of Harkness, Agatha Coven of Chaos, the Agatha Darkhold Diaries, to what it is now, Agatha All Along. It's just, they've also been some production changes. I think that is, I don't agree with the group, and to be honest, listeners, all fandoms suck. But I don't agree with the group of people of like, oh, you had to put women in it and make it gay, and so therefore the show sucks. It's like, it's not that, and I really get tired of that kind of stuff popping up the minute that the first episode drops or whatever. It's just really not called for, and I don't think that is what's going on here. I think, WandaVision was a story about a person who was going through a great tragedy and made a mistake, and she made an entire town suffer. She tried to redeem herself in the movie, and then she had a freak out, and now you've got a person who is trying to recover from being trapped in Wanda's world and is trying to get her powers back. And so it's a journey for her of trying to deal with the chaos that someone else created. And again, Agatha's not a good person; she's still a villain. But
so we've got a redemption arc baking too. So
yeah. And then, of course, there's the question of the
brigaded on Rotten Tomatoes.
What's that?
Or did they get brigaded by negative Nazis?
Probably. I wouldn't surprise me, but I typically don't go to Rotten Tomatoes. I typically, don't like to look at what other people are reviewing, especially in an aggregated site like Rotten Tomatoes. It's got a 78% from the tomato meter and 79% from the what is it called? The popcorn meter has a 79%. The one thing is, I know one of the things that Rotten Tomatoes has done is you can't post reviews until after the movie has been released, so it prevents early bombing, which was what was going on before. And so I think they've also done this where you can't post reviews like on episode 3 until episode 3 comes out for this one. Awesome. So that's kind of where it sits right now.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. It didn't blow me out of the water, but it certainly was something different, and I like when people try something different.
Yeah. Yep. And I was going to have to try something real different from here on out. Like, it has a lot working against it. But it comes out every Wednesday.
Yeah, for whatever reason, that's when all of my favorite shows come out are on Wednesday now. So
yeah, I don't know. That must be a streaming thing, right? They must have.
I think it must be, because
and they're like everybody's most depressed on Wednesday, so that's when they want to get home and watch.
That must be it, or else, Wednesday is that day when you release it. People are not aware that the show is out until like a Thursday, Friday, and so that's when they catch up on it. I haven't really figured out why the Wednesday release schedule. So there you go. That being said, for people listening to the show, you know that most of you wake up Wednesday morning and it's right there waiting for you. And the reason is because new comic book day, and we talk about new comic books on this show most of the time. Yeah. And so speaking of experiments, this week from Image Comics, it's the Horizon experiment, the Manchurian. So what the Horizon experiment is Pornsak Pichetshote, or Pichetshote, got together this idea of what if we did like a pilot season type event where we have a bunch of one-shots where we go and we have creators go and tell stories about people of different cultures, of different cultural backgrounds, people of color, etc. And we tell their stories and make them the central focus of this, because Pornsak is responsible for The Good Asian, the one that we reviewed a few years ago and won all the awards. And he also did that one about the Muslim woman living in the creepy apartment. I think Rodrigo reviewed that, or at least I know I reviewed one of those issues where horrible things were happening to her, but it was a kind of a commentary on America and how they treat Muslims. So in this one, you're going to have, I think there's 5 or 6 one-shots that all serve as pilots to potentially a bigger story if they take off. The first one is called The Manchurian, and it's written by Pornsak Pichetshote with Terry Dodson doing the art on that. So you know automatically that the art is going to be beautiful, and the women that are being drawn are beautiful, and the men that are being drawn are beautiful. But this is a story about a Chinese James Bond is how it's being pitched, in that in China, their secret, or their MI6, or their equivalent of the CIA, their agents are not out to do political intrigue, but instead they're out to do corporate intrigue, to go in and find out what are corporations doing, to do corporate espionage, and most importantly, for the character that we get introduced to in The Manchurian, a person who has been implanted in America, is supposed to be having social life and integrate with America, and secretly make friends with people at major corporations and either recruit them to reveal corporate secrets or to have them casually drop corporate secrets when they don't realize they're dropping corporate secrets by just being friends, and then sending that information back to China to where they can steal those ideas and build off of them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The question is our central character becoming too sympathetic to his American agents? Does he care for them too much? Is he becoming too, quote unquote, American? And what will happen if he gets, too close to the good people? And so it kind of ends with this question of, will other Chinese agents take out those that are closest to him, even though he is doing everything he can to protect his American spies, I guess is the best way to do it. It's an interesting story. I see where they're going with this. I think just because we've been kind of, media has pushed us to think that, hey, all Chinese, the Chinese spies are bad, Russian spies are bad, they're the enemy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think having a spy who is Chinese and his mission is to infiltrate, American corporations and steal their ideas, as opposed to going in and assassinating political figures or, setting off some terror plot. Something about that is just kind of off kilter for me, and maybe that's kind of the point, is to get you to question, who's right and who's wrong in this crazy thing, kind of like reading The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. And so that may be part of the disconnect that I'm having here. The other thing is, it's a one shot that ends on a cliffhanger. There is no issue 2 of the Manchurian for now, unless there's enough interest from readers or enough interest from Image, who is the imprint, the company that's overseeing the printing of this Horizon Experiment series. And so I don't know how to approach this. Is it a well-told tale? Yes. Are we presenting an idea in a different way? Are we taking the concept of a James Bond character, but we're making him Chinese and working for the Chinese government instead of the British government? Can we explore what it means to be the Chinese spy? Yeah, we can certainly do that. Is the art fantastic? The art is fantastic. I think the story drives us to a point, but I kind of wanted a resolution. Knowing that this is a one-shot, I kind of needed a resolution. Like, give me that pilot episode that has a distinct beginning, middle, and end, as opposed to, hey, Mr. Spy, we warned you about these things, and then we're going to end on a cliffhanger of, is this person going to pull the trigger or not? That did not make me happy. Typically, if you see a pilot episode of something, it has a distinct beginning, middle, and end, and it stands on its own, so that if it scores well, they can pick right up and continue on telling their own stories, never having to recognize the pilot if they don't want to. But this one feels like if it's picked up, it'll be the Manchurian issue number 2, and it'll pick right up from issue number 1, but we don't know if or when that will happen. So this kind of feels like, I don't know, buying bubblegum cards and hoping that you're going to get that one rare card, and you buy it and you get a bunch of cards that are cool, but then you go back the next time and the company has decided no longer to sell bubblegum cards. That's how this feels.
So this is one story per issue.
Yeah, every issue is going. Okay. So the next one that comes out is in October, and I forget what the one on that one is. I know the very last one is the Reverse Indiana Jones. I think next month is the Muslim exorcist story. And I forget what else is in the Horizon Experiment story.
So it's not like Dark Horse Presents, where it was like chunks of each story in the same issue. Okay.
Nope. It is a totally different story, totally different creative team for the next issue that comes out. That will also be a number 1 issue. It won't be called the Manchurian. It'll be called the Horizon Experiment : something number 1, and it's just a one shot. And so it may never proceed from there. So, yeah, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 slices of meatloaf. It was enjoyable, but wasn't satisfying, if that makes sense. I would like to see where it goes, and if it has. This book started to plant the seed of an idea that would then be expanded upon, like in The Good Asian, where you're presented with this story, and you're like, oh, as the story progresses, you start to see more of the theme that Pornsak is presenting, to where when you get to the end, you're like, okay, this is a solid argument that has been made. I understand the point of view. I understand what's going on. This one just plants the seed, and then it's just like, maybe it'll grow. Maybe it won't. We'll never find out unless we do. Good luck. Have fun. Thanks for checking us out. And so that's kind of
the castle.
Yeah, that's kind of my disillusionment with this. I think it's a great experiment. I think doing a pilot season thing is cool. But I would like to see them, this is probably a bad way of saying it, I'd like to see them, razzle dazzle me a little bit, not do a phone line where you call in a specific number to vote for your favorite issue, but get to social media a little bit more and hype these things up, and have each group of creators, hype up their title, so that you can get behind it, and then maybe from that you get to do a Dancing with the Stars or, last person standing kind of thing. I don't know. I like the idea of the experiment. I don't know if it's going to execute correctly. So there we go. Matthew, you took a look at another Image comic this week. What you got?
I did. I have Violent Flowers, #1, written and drawn by Maria Llovet. And I bought this entirely because I accidentally read issue 1 of her previous series, CRAVE, and went, oh my God, this is amazing. Several years ago, I think Stephen and I did an issue of
she's had a bunch of
Faithless.
Yeah, she's got a bunch of stuff. She's done stuff at Boom and Image, and her stuff is generally adults only. So just be aware of that when you go into this.
This story does not have the same level of sexuality that I've come to expect from, your Faithless and your Craves, but it does have it, and it is definitely there. This is more of it's actually, I don't know how to describe it. It's not magical realism. It's not necessarily full-on gothic dark fantasy. It's a little bit of both, but our story starts in the late 1600s with a coven of vampires. And you're like, oh man, Matthew, don't you hate weird vampire stories? I'm like, no, I love weird vampire stories. I hate poorly done weird vampire stories. And the one thing about this that immediately grabs me is I have no idea who these characters are on page 1, but I can immediately grasp their relationship to one another. And when someone who's clearly some sort of evil queen tells the girl, you will drown in salt water forever, time forever, and she's begging and begging and going, no, please, I love you. Nicodemus won't allow it. He has given his consent. I'm like, okay, that's everything I need to know. Now I just need to figure out who these people are. So the first thing you need to know is this is absolutely ridiculously gorgeous, just like everything Maria Llovet touches. Visually, this is even more intricate than Crave, even more intricate than Faithless, where, you have characters who are dating demons and you go, I would never date a oh, well, maybe. This is a story where every character has their own sort of body language. You kind of get a feel for them. The thing that really, really sticks with me is as this issue progresses, we see one and only one human character. I'm not sure if she's our cabbage head, our POV character. I'm not sure if she's meant to be something else. I'm not sure if she's gonna, be, I don't know, Renesmee, whatever it's going to be. But at the end of the issue, when 2 of our characters fly off into the sky and literally start tearing off each other's clothes and kissing and biting, and I'm like, wait, okay, oh, they are going to do that in midair. They do that in midair, and I will definitely be back for issue 2. Mostly because this feels like something. This feels like a creator who has really put work into the world building, so much so that the world building doesn't feel like we're being, exposed to things. One of the things that some of my favorite storytellers will do the world building accidentally. So if you're going through a Steve Gerber comic, you know that all of this is back there and you only see behind the curtain when you need to. Like when you're playing a game with Rodrigo Lopez, you know that the world building is there. You only get it when it's absolutely necessary and motivated to the story, but it's always there. And you can feel that sort of structural soundness in this story. You feel not necessarily safe, but it's kind of the same feeling that I get with an issue of Astro City. I feel like everything is figured out. Even if we don't know necessarily what's going on, and characters are suddenly aging and de-aging and biting each other, and there's kissing and blood, and there is not full frontal nudity, but there is female upper torso nudity in this page. So obviously 18 and above. But I gotta tell you guys, this series is really something that I feel like I'm into. I'm gonna go with 4.5 slices of meatloaf. The only real complaint that I have is that, as with so many first issue, sometimes you have to compromise your $3.99 price point with the number of pages. I would have loved this to be like a double-sized or additional art, just to look at it and go, oh, this is so beautiful. But yeah, 4.5 slices of meatloaf for Violent Flowers, #1. If you don't know Maria Llovet, learn the name Maria Llovet. I feel like they're going to be something really huge for a very long time.
All right, there you go. Dear listeners, if you want to show your thanks for everything that we do, if you find some information, enjoyment, you get a chuckle, you get a laugh, you had a chance to cluck your tongue and shake your head, if you had some new information dropped on you that you didn't get anywhere else, how about giving a little bit back and becoming a patron over at patreon.com/major spoilers? You can support small indie creators. You don't need to give money to NPR. You don't need to give money to, the big podcast networks. They're already making millions upon millions of dollars. The indies is where you want to put your money at. Just like when we give money to our comic, small comic publishers like Image Comics, all independent creators. Image doesn't own that stuff. Maria, Pornsak, Terry, all those guys, they have to make their bank off of selling through Image. Image takes a small chunk because they're the distributor, but they don't get to decide what gets made and what doesn't get made. Same way here at Major Spoilers, we decide what gets made. We don't have some corporate overlord telling us what we can and can't do. I actually had to talk to a student today, and he was talking about things that he wants to do, and I was like, well, you do know that if you go to a TV station, they're not going to let you do any of that because that's not what they do. Same way if you go and work for a production house, you're not going to get to go make those things because that's not what they do. If you want to do it, you have to be an indie, and that's what we are. We are independent creators, and we rely on you, our dearest listeners, to make sure that we can bring this show to you week after week. And this week, we are giving a shout-out to James Humphreys, who just updated their pledge to a full year. Increased their pledge, paid for the full year in advance. And, dear listeners, when you do pay for a full year in advance, whether that be the $5 level and you pay the $60 for the year, or the $10 level and you want to pay that $120 for the entire year, you get a discount. So you're not even paying $60 or $120. You're like paying like 10 months and getting 2 months free or something like that. You'd have to do the exact math, but that's what you get. That's a bargain. And we can't do what we do without the fine people like James Humphreys have done for us. So what are you waiting for? Like I said at the top of the show, my son's going to need to have therapy paid for because his dad didn't come and watch him score 2 goals. 2 goals out of the 3 goals in the game. The game was over by the time we got to this point in the show. 2 out of the 3 goals. He needs to have that therapy paid for. Where's that going to come from? You, dear listener, you, because I'll be long dead by the time he needs therapy. So we can set up that therapy account for him now. Head over to patreon.com/major spoilers.
Don't underestimate the amount of damage we can do to our children in a short
time. Oh, no, I've already told them. I said, hey, listen, the sins of the father are visited upon the son, and that often takes the form of not abuse as in physical abuse or mental abuse, but just the things that
trauma.
Yeah, the trauma that your parents have had often get passed on to kids, whether the parents know it or not. And it's up to each generation to try and do better. And I feel like I'm much better than my father. And I said, but I still have passed on some of that trauma to you. And now you're going to be better with your kid and so on and so forth until we can remove that whole thing out of the system. So just be aware of that, which is kind of appropriate when we're talking about Dr. Fate, because the trauma of one being passed on to the trauma of others down through the ages is explored in depth in this series, which I actually thought the series we were reading was the reboot of Dr. Fate with the two beings, 2 people serving as Dr. Fate instead of the last adventure of Kent Nelson, where he gets to explore all of his childhood trauma at the hands of Naboo. This is a dark, dark comic. This is the thing about this is, had this story been told 10 years later, this would definitely have been a Vertigo title.
Yes.
So what we're seeing here, this book, Dr. Fate, volume, whatever it is, it's the 4-issue miniseries of
Dr. Fate Volume 1.
Yeah, Dr. Fate Volume 1, 4-issue miniseries. Came out in 1987. And I want to say that's like 10 years or so before, maybe, when did that come out? 92, 93 when Vertigo started. So it's a while before Vertigo started, and Vertigo typically deals with mature topics, with intense topics. And this one, I think these guys are working out some things, Rodrigo.
Yeah, working out a lot. There is, I think when you say that this would have been a Vertigo title, I think you're right, not just because of the subject matter, but even the sort of like narration style. It's really going for this like large, sort of poetic kind of thing where like the individual action doesn't matter as much as like the concepts being conveyed as things kind of go through. There are obviously individual specific actions that happen that are important and relevant. But a lot of it is like we just kind of zoom all the way out. And we're talking about the fundamental forces of law and chaos. It's what like Malekian, Terrence Malekian.
Yeah.
Um,
And 87, sorry, I didn't mean to jump over you.
Go ahead.
Okay. 87 is really, Stephen's absolutely right, Vertigo, because this is the same year that Morrison takes over their Doom Patrol. This is the year that Swamp Thing, ends the run of Alan Moore and goes into Jamie Delano. It's the year that Hellblazer, or actually the year before Hellblazer kicks off. And the actual Vertigo line starts in 93. This book is on the stands at the same time as the building blocks of Vertigo, your Shade to Changing Man, your Animal Man.
But see, that was one of the reasons why Vertigo was created, is because it's like, wow, this stuff is pretty heady and heavy to be part of our superhero line. So we need to move all of this stuff, including what would then become Sandman and Hellblazer, over to this, and Swamp Thing later on. We need to move that over into this because this is more mature topics. I think this... I'm trying to debate and decide here if Dr. Fate would have been, along with, Books of Magic certainly was a Vertigo title, I think. But would Dr. Fate be put into the Vertigo universe, or would he be too closely tied to superhero stuff that they would have just said, hey, tone it down a little bit, don't make it so dark, and just move on from that? Because Phantom Stranger was a Vertigo character. It ended up becoming a Vertigo character. So I wonder if this one would. I mean, certainly the nature of this book would have a lot of people going, "What the heck is DC doing?" You already mentioned all the other books that were going on at the same time, but this is also post-crisis, right? We have, as we've talked about in a couple of our other shows, including the Legion Clubhouse episode, we're just done with Crisis. We are just at the Frank Miller comes to DC and has done Legends of the Dark Knight, where everything is getting grimmer and darker and grittier. And so we get introduced to Kent Nelson, who is starting to pass on the mantle of Naboo, of Dr. Fate, to someone else. And to do it, he must kidnap a child and force the child to grow up more than he should and be forced to deal with these very adult things. And as the story is told, it comes to find out that this exact same thing happened to Kent Nelson, where his dad drug him to an archaeological dig where they uncovered the body, and young Kent Nelson was given the power of Dr. Fate and was forced to grow up instantly. We find out that Kent is the one that's being kind of controlled by Naboo to do this. There's a very good indication that Kent's father was also being controlled and offering up his son to the lords of order. It's deep. It is something that is stuff to think about.
I don't remember if this is the first time that we see Kent specifically identified as a tool, or Naboo specifically identified as a Lord of Order, but it's very early.
So I went back and I read the Immortal Dr. Fate series, which I think was a 3-issue series that came out in 85. So just before this.
That was reprinting the backup strips from Flash. Yes, Immortal Dr. Fate.
But one of the stories in there is, I think it's the second one, which is a more modern telling. But they also talk about how Kent's wife, girlfriend, whatever she is recounting. She's recounting the events, and she's like, "Oh no!" And she basically says, Kent's father was killed, and all these things. And so it does imply that in that one that he was also a part of the Lords of Order or Gods of Order or whatever that they're called. So I don't know. It's something definitely 80s-ish. I don't think if you go back and look at the very first story that it is implied that anything other than, hey, kid, we're giving you mystical powers kind of thing, Shazam kind of wish fulfillment going on in there.
Oh, yeah. And that early run, Golden Age run, virtually none of that is actually here.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
The thing that is difficult with this is, would it be a Vertigo title? Dr. Fate was simultaneously, this issue 1 came out in May of 87, Justice League, Volume 1, where Dr. Fate is a core member of the Justice League for the first 7 issues, came out like 2 months earlier in January. Same creative team too, DeMatteis and Giffen on the writing. But it's, apparently the Lords of Order, it's from the first issue special appearance of Dr. Fate back in 75. So yeah, this is not the first time he's identified as a Lord of Order, but he is canonically the first Lord of Order that we meet, and probably the most Freudian.
Yeah, what do you guys think? So there's two really kind of weird topics in this. The first is, taking the son and forcing them into this, or taking a kid and forcing them into this life. Rodrigo, what are your thoughts on this? Because the name of this 4-issue series is Cycles, right? Where these same things are happening again and again and again as Nabu is becoming more, quote, human and losing his reason that only a powerful Lord of Order could have, and doing these horrible things.
So here's what I think. Stuff like this has created a character that's a lot more interesting to have as a secondary character. Like if you guys remember like JLU stuff, right? There's not necessarily all the same stuff going on, but Dr. Fate is doing his own thing. And I think in Young Justice too, he's kind of, it's like his ideas don't always run parallel to the other heroes, right? Sometimes he's like, nope. And then just like zaps everybody out of there because he's like, even though we were going to win, this needs to not happen for like the greater good or whatever. So this idea that, tortured children burn into, like, take the mantle of Dr. Fate in like a grueling ritual, like I'm okay with that as long as that's not our protagonist, right? Like it doesn't make me say, wow, Dr. Fate is cool. It makes me say this general idea for basically a monster that is on the side of order is cool and is an interesting idea. And again, I feel that because of this stuff, Dr. Fate fits a lot better as this like antagonist or sort of like interested party in other magical stuff or in other superhero stuff.
Yeah. And J.M. DeMatteis specifically, as a creator, I find has a focus on, I don't want to call it a coming of age story, but it really is kind of a thing where the characters go through a lot of sorrow, a lot of loss, a lot of, danger and doubt and just really horrible things. I mean, even the Beast, who's in the pages of New Defenders was kind of a wacky jumping around, hey kids, hiya guy, had these dark things going on behind his facade of happy. So having DeMatteis say, Dr. Fate, the background of Dr. Fate is built on this tragedy, and it's built on children being forced to take on the mantle and deal with the literal sins of the father. That's all in keeping with what I expect from a DeMatteis joint. But this series also has Keith Giffen, and what I expect from Keith Giffen is incredibly depressing. And I love Giffen as a creator, don't get me wrong. I feel like as a writer, he's a very creative, he's a very interesting man. But I feel like together, Keith and JM have created a book that I don't want to read again. And I didn't.
Do they feed upon their own worst I shouldn't say worst, but maybe their darkest thoughts? They feed upon those and bring those into the pages.
I feel like they meet in a place. They meet in a place that feels darker than either of them realizes, if
Yeah,
that makes
yeah,
sense. It's kind of
yeah,
like, and it's telling because they are long-term co-creators and they work together and they can do wacky fun. You remember the first
oh
arc
yeah,
of Justice League, the
yeah,
crazy, but you remember how it then kind of they're still creating it when it goes to cooey, and when the book becomes all about failure, and then we get into breakdowns, and the book becomes about all of these heroes have failed and they're all dying slowly because of their failures and they're being murdered and ICE is dead and Martian Manhunter is forever scarred by the horrible things he's seen and Gypsy feels like she was, dragged into being a child soldier. All of that is still there. And I feel like on the one hand that's great because a lot of creators can't balance wacky fun and humor and then the darkness, in this case some of the extreme darkness. But I didn't read this book when it came out in 87 because of the art, but I feel like as an adult having read it, I'm glad I read it, but I don't want to read it again
yeah,
because of the story.
yeah. And I mean, it's pretty weird whenever you have characters, like whether you're talking about Nabu or whether you're talking about Typhon or whether you're just talking about Dr. What's his name, who's running Arkham Asylum, who is like,
Stoner.
yeah, Stoner is like the worst, maybe the worst person in this entire book, right? Where he's supposed to be a healer and yet he locks characters up into Arkham, and the Joker, Sandman, or not Sandman, Scarecrow, Clayface, all of these characters pale in comparison to the evil that is Stoner or the evil that is Nabu. And so this is, again, it's a dark book. And then it gets even weirder when we go into the second part, which is, hey, we've stolen this 10-year-old boy who is being taken care of by his stepmother because the father is dead. The stepmother is an adult, but she's a young adult. And, oh, by the way, she's in love with the 10-year-old. And so when this young boy is forced to age up over the course of like 2 days or something into an adult, now she feels like it's okay to have these sexual and love feelings for this 10-year-old boy. And that is, again, oh boy, maybe it's there for shock value. Maybe it's not. It's certainly there to drive the story of why we need this yin yang balance between male, female. And, that's how you have order and chaos together. But it's a weird way to get to that.
It's interesting that this happens the same year that Aricia Robb, the Green Lantern, ages herself up from 13 to 26 so that she can then, within the narrative of the story, within herself and within Hal Jordan, have what they believe is a guilt-free romance, even though she is still physically and emotionally a child. Although, they later retcon it that 13 years on her planet is actually 156 years on our planet.
Well, they've been taking that United Planets serum.
Absolutely, like nonsense anime stuff of like, she's actually a 4,000-year-old dragon.
She's actually 700. But I feel like those, especially in the context of 1987 and some of the darkest stories that we see in comics in this era, it's interesting to see that Freudian thread appearing not once, but several times and having it kind of pop up to where, the expectation that, yes, this is a person who's dealing with the sins of the father, who's then literally replacing the father. It's just, I don't know. It's Oedipus, baby. It's Oedipus.
Well, but I mean, also,
here's the thing about that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we look at other age differences, what's the age difference between Kitty Pryde and Colossus?
6 years.
What's
Colossus
the age?
Is 19. She's 13.
What's the age difference between? And I know Wolverine and Jubilee never had anything going on, but what was their age differences? Like 100 years.
Jubilee
or something
was
like that.
14. He was like 150 something.
Okay. Yeah. There's a weird. I don't know. It's all weird. It's really creepy in today's world.
Here's the interesting thing about this, right? When you look at Aricia was created as the sidekick character. And she was a kid for, I don't know, at least a few issues. when you look at Twilight and you have this competition between the werewolf boy and the vampire boy for the same girl, it's like, okay, that's how it's written. And both Aricia and what happens in Twilight are writers trying to contort their way into changing a relationship, right? It's like Aricia is like, oh, well, like people are really responding to her. We want her to like make out with Hal Jordan instead, so let's age her up. And Twilight is like, well, I want to like settle the Team Edward, Team Jacob thing, so we'll have Bella have a baby who then it turns out Jacob is in love with and has always been in love with. And that is what happens in Twilight.
Right.
So, right, it's like this weird contortion to be able to write something else than what has already been established. It falls well into those like weird sci-fi rules of like, is it mind control if like only one of you is a clone, right? But that's the thing about this Dr. Fate thing. It's unforced. Like that's the story. The story is this happens. It's not like they're trying to be like, okay, well, let me fix this up. We've already established that this character is young, but we really want to have this happen, or this is already happening in other books or whatever, so we need to fix it here. Like this just seems completely unforced. Like they came in and they wrote an outline, and the outline is baby dates mom.
Yeah.
Right.
Or mom wants to date baby is the real thing.
Well, yeah, and you do get into those weird questions of, yes, they are not related. She is his father's wife, but the fact that he is still physically 10 is really never established. And spoilers, the next series, the one that Stephen thought we were reviewing, initially starts with Eric and Linda as Dr. Fate.
Yeah.
Eric dies like a year in. Not dies. I mean, it's a DC comic, but it's interesting that while Eric and Linda are Dr. Fate, that body also switches from male presentation to female presentation.
Which is what's being set up in this book.
Again. Right. And that's the same thing that happens again after they are both taken out. Kent and Inza become Dr. Fate and switch from male presentation to female presentation. Stephen, you remember the really gorgeous Dr. Fate as a pretty lady drawn by Adam Hughes from Justice League, like issue 35. That's actually Inza, who we see in this issue as an older, an adult old woman.
She's deceased in this one.
Right, but we do get to a point where again that that body switching, that back and forth. There's a lot of that in 80s comics, and I feel like to some degree, kind of like with when we talk in the Legion Clubhouse about what's going on in the real world, that idea of he's an adult now. She can, non-problematically have a relationship with him,
there's a
like
whole category on Pornhub that's all about this stuff.
Sure.
But that's the thing too, and that's the implication. There's none of that here. This is not played as a sexual thing. This is not played. This is played as like kind of a soulmate thing. And this is a year before Tom Hanks grows up and is a 12-year-old boy sleeping with Elizabeth Perkins.
Yeah, exactly.
And I feel like I don't know if it's something that's happening in the universe in the 80s where people are experimenting with this idea of.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, you've transformed your physical body. What effect does that have on your psychological self? And I don't think that they really kind of read into any long-term implications of that because hey, this is a comic book.
Well, and go ahead.
No,
well,
go ahead. It's cool.
Yeah, I was going to say it's different. If it's a young boy going, I've got the hots for my stepmom. That's something that it's like, okay, that's just you're going through puberty, kid. Here's a book. It's very different when adult is like, I'm attracted to this young boy.
Yeah, I think Matthew really hit it in that it was something that at the time, I think across media was being kind of talked about and worked out. And the reason why we feel the way that we do about it is because that's where we've cooked it out, right?
Yeah.
Like we have been thinking about this specific trope for a while, right? It's like we get into it with I made a reference to it earlier. Tropes about mind control, tropes about fooling someone, right? In the Great Brain Robbery, great episode of Justice League Unlimited, um, Flash and Lex Luthor change bodies, and it is heavily implied that Flash, as Lex Luthor, has sex with Lex Luthor's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Whose name I don't remember, but she's like a purple and
Mercy?
white lady. Maybe I don't remember. But she is some kind of spellcaster or whatever. And it's like you kind of have to like wait a minute.
Don't look too deep into it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if you look into it, there's some discourse there of like the reason why that happens is because Flash is nice to her, which Luthor never is.
Yeah.
So it's like actually she gets to have a good, fulfilling experience for one. So maybe it's not bad, but there's all these other buts, right? So superhero comics, science fiction, all of this stuff allows us to explore these kind of out there ideas and their implications, right? It's like if you guys, one of my favorite moments in Critical Hit, we're playing Numenera. Steven gets a teleportation device, like Steven's character does, and Steven describes the character as appearing in the second location first before the character is immolated, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a trope. We've been talking about teleportation. Do you die? Is it a new thing? What are the like ethics of it? What would the reality of it be? Steven made a call and it was like hilarious and scary and actually very in flavor for Numenera. But it's because it's a trope that has been around for a long time and we've been talking about it, and that's kind of where we're at with it. So like I would say definitely the main thing is like if you're not reading fiction and you're not reading superhero comics and science fiction and watching movies and stuff like that, you are in line to repeat problematic tropes. I think kind of like Twilight did, although nowadays we're closer, like Twilight and this are closer to each other than we are to the Stegosaurus. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess I'm just if this were to come out today, so many people would be screaming pedophilia in this whole thing. But at the same time, you go back to 1985, and we're joking about it when Marty's mom wants to get it on with her son, and she doesn't know it's her son. That's the joke of Back to the Future. So I don't know.
To some degree,
I think, and Matthew and I talk about this a lot in Legion Clubhouse, is if we are looking at these comics from the lens of today, here's where all the problems show up, or here's where things really shine and they predicted things in the future. To me, I get to this part, I'm like, through the lens of today, this book would be banned. This book would be, people would be forced to apologize for having this stuff in a comic book that comes out today.
And part of it is that I feel like in 1987, it wasn't unthinkable.
No.
But it was definitely a thing where you wouldn't immediately go, oh, ha, ha, I see jokes about this all the time on Reddit.
So,
Well,
but I mean, it is the theme of movies. As Rodrigo said, it does show up in a lot of tropes. And if you think about who is the target audience for this, I'm sure that there were a lot of young boys who were attracted to older women and were like, man, I would sure like to know that the older woman is into me. You've got a wish fulfillment thing that's going on here as well. I think it's an interesting part of the story, but it also really complicates this idea of good and bad, dark and light. I like the fact that when we look at the art in a lot of these pages, most of the people's faces are obscured almost either halfway or completely in dark shadows, even though they're talking about, no, I'm the good guy. And half their face is like covered in just pure black. It's really, this is a deep book. I don't think this is something that you pick up and read for a casual fun read on a Sunday afternoon. This is something I think you need to be prepared to go into and really think about what is good, what is bad, what happens when good becomes corrupted or when they believe in their own hype too much and let it get carried away.
And I have complained about Keith Giffen's Munoz period, but in these pages dealing with ancient monsters and body horror that makes sense, having a giant
giant
mouth in your stomach, or having your entire face be swallowed up by the equivalent of the helmet of fate, and there's just a giant, fangy kind of a venom thing, pre-venom. It works here. It makes sense.
The horror parts really work.
Yeah, but even when you see, there's that first big shot in issue 2 where Eric transforms for the first time, and you see Dr. Fate in traditional Dr. Fate clothes, but you look at him and it's like, it's muscular, but it's not superhero proportioned. He's skinny, he's weird, he's kind of wiry and disturbing, like the tall man from Phantasm. And then when the creepy stuff starts to happen to this Dr. Fate, you're like, yeah, he's part and parcel of the creepy stuff. This art style works so well here, where I complained and complained and complained about it on Legion of Superheroes and Ambush Bug. Here it's really, really well done. I hate every page of it, and that's how I know that it's good. Because body horror and we are not friends. We do not need to talk, and you guys can just rock me to sleep tonight with the giant gaping maws on the end of the fingers.
Yeah, that's the cool stuff, right? At least it's not his eyes, right? Like in Sandman. Question for you guys. Yes. Do you think that this story is too small? Because there's a point where Typhon is sending out this wave of chaos and madness around the world, and people are killing each other in the streets, and all these horrible things are happening. And then we get a sequence in segment 3, in issue 3, where Martian Manhunter, Mr. Miracle, the Phantom, Batman, Guy Gardner, and is there one more? Maybe that's it. They all show up and they're like, hey, this needs to stop. And there's this big battle between, these heroes, which are planting the seed of doubt inside of Typhon. And everything that happens, it almost feels like this story would have been like a summer event story, right? Where now each of these heroes in their own book have to deal with this madness. It just feels like the story blows up and then quickly shrinks into nothing in those 4 issues, almost like the first season of Moon Knight on Disney Plus.
To some degree. Now, though, with the exception of the Phantom Stranger, who is, an interdimensional kibitzer, those guys are Dr. Fate's teammates in the Justice League. So they have come to deal with Dr. Fate because they're basically his guys at this point in time. So I feel like, would I have liked to see some Superman involvement? Would I have liked to see, more Green Lanterns? Maybe, but this is also 87.
Well, then I want to see this spill out into the Justice League book, then, right? I mean, I just want to see this world madness becoming a big issue where the Justice League has to be involved.
Yeah, what it spills out into is an ongoing Dr. Fate series in 88.
Yeah.
This is back at the point when your 4-issue limited series was basically
your pilot season.
A trial balloon for your ongoing. And Dr. Fate was created in 1940, guys. This came out in 87. This is Dr. Fate Volume 1, Number 1. Mm-hmm. So it's 50 years of Dr. Fate where nobody thought, let's give him his own book.
Yeah.
This limited series got him a 60-issue run,
let's see. Volume 2 went all the way up to issue 41 is what I'm seeing.
Okay.
88 and then 88 to 92. And then you had Volume 3, which kicked off in 2003 and went until...
And then the Volume 4, I think, is either just ended or ongoing.
Yeah, still ongoing or something like that. So,
yeah.
What do you guys think? Is this something you would recommend, Matthew? What are your final thoughts?
No, I would not recommend this. However, if you love a good, solid horror comic with kind of an old school Bronze Age kick, definitely this is going to be your jam. For me, just there's too much body horror. There are too many unpleasant Freudian overtones. There's too much darkness. And I immediately had to go, read some Justice League International afterwards to remind me that, JM and Keith are my friend buddies who wrote comics that didn't make me cry.
Yeah. Rodrigo, what about you?
There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here. If you want to read something where it's kind of like, just because this character stands against chaos doesn't mean they're good, right? Just because an angel doesn't mean that they're doing a good thing. It's like, yeah, that's here, but maybe just go read Hellblazer, because at least it's digestible in that medium. It's hard. It's like, I feel that I read a 4-issue origin story to an NPC, to like a character that you actually can't have as a protagonist.
Yeah.
So I would give it a pass.
I skipped this 4-issue mini when it first came out. I did read the second volume when it was published, and I think I went through the first year of that and rather enjoyed it. This has too many dark and disturbing imagery, messages. There's a lot to process in here, which sometimes I like in my comic books, but sometimes having to deal with childhood traumas and the implications of somebody that is definitely taking advantage of a minor potentially is somewhat problematic. And so I don't know if I would recommend this book as one of the greatest Dr. Fate stories of all time. I would say that this is a Dr. Fate story that is definitely a product of its time period, and it suffers from all the trappings of that point in time. We talked about those before: Crisis, Dark Knight Returns, Comics Dark in general, The Watchmen, Tom Hanks, all these things. And so I think if you're going to read this, you need to realize that this is definitely a product of that time period, and you need to use your own judgment of today as you go and look at that book, but also be aware of that time period. So,
and blame Tom Hanks.
I'm not going to recommend it, but if you have listened to us for the last 35 minutes and you're like, damn, these guys are bagging on this book and now I really want to read it, go in forewarned. Just go in forewarned. So there you go.
Forewarned is forearms. And if you have forearms,
there you go.
Like,
and you could probably be a character in DC Comics fighting off a gooey face man. Anyway, that wraps it up for this installment of the Major Spoilers Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you found value in this show, we'd love for you to join us over on our Patreon page. Final score in the game, 3-0. The boy scored 2 of those 3 points. Listen, when you go over there onto the pre-show, you're going to find all sorts of stuff, including... when you go to the Patreon, you're going to find the Major Spoilers Podcast pre-show, probably another 15 minutes of us talking about all sorts of things. We talk about what the boys' favorite anime is, and you can hear Rodrigo just, his head spin, his bow tie is spinning around. We get to talk about Twilight of the Gods and a whole lot more. You can only get that when you become a patron at patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Next week on the show, we have slated Bone Parish Volume 1. Why? Because we know that you love comics and we do too, and we will talk with you soon.
If I had the X-ray vision of a Superman, I could save a few bucks and stand around and read through the covers of the comics on the stand. But although every other page would be backwards, I suppose I could still read the evens and the odds. Well, I don't know. Guess I haven't thought this all the way through. Plus, as soon as the comic book store guy knew, he kicked my butt out on the corner. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Think about a better way. If I was hulking green or gray, I could just bust through that brick wall, take their comic books away. But then the little meat would deal with all the tanks and bombs and guns. Have you ever tried to read a series with all that going on? Guess I need to rethink this plan. How would I bag and board my comics with such huge hands? Guess I already told ya. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. If I'm Stark Raven, it's like a man of iron. I might not be surprised to find that I might actually have the heart cold to follow an entire storyline. But would I really even need to read up on all those escapades? I mean, who needs such distractions when your sister's such a babe? But the downside is such a beast. Being shot up in a fun bee in the Middle East with a gang sign throwing soldier. What a major spoiler. What a major spoiler. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a major spoiler. Whoa, 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 whoa. What a major spoiler.
This podcast is copyright 2024 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.